You know, the Rahm Emanuel slogan of a crisis is a terrible thing to waste. I'm hopeful that part of the hundreds of billions of dollars that will be spent, I believe, I'm hopeful that we can do some big things.
Let me just start with, it's a remarkable time. What are you seeing right now that's really heartening to you, and what are you seeing that's worrisome? And you're a former public official and a parent. What are you seeing that excites you and worries you?
I would say on the positives, I'm seeing a lot of great grassroots level efforts. So I've seen efforts of schools rallying to raise dollars for Chromebooks to get them to low-income families that may not have had them, to rally to raise dollars for hotspots so that young people can access the internet from home and access distance learning. We've seen efforts around meals, which have been very positive and heartening. It's been positive to see at the more policy level to see the government invest almost $15 billion in K-12, another roughly 15 in higher ed. So that's been positive. What's more concerning, though, is that in many ways, the coronavirus and the educational challenges associated with it have just further uncovered the things many of us already know about in terms of inequities associated with class, as well as race, as well as immigration status, and also disability status in terms of the ability of discrete subgroups of students to access learning. And so we know that children from those four subgroup categories are more likely to be in homes that don't have access to the internet from home, more likely to have parents who either's jobs are more likely to be displaced given the unemployment dislocations associated with the virus, or are in the types of jobs that actually have to leave the home and show up, which both means that the student is at home, oftentimes by him or herself, trying to access learning, which we know is suboptimal for students. And it means that those parents are at a greater risk of exposing themselves to the virus, given that they have to go out and get to a job. I think government has taken some very small baby steps to address them, but we still have a very long way to go in that regard.
What do you want to see from Joe Biden on education, and what are you hoping to see there in terms of his campaign and a possible Biden administration?
Democrats tend to focus primarily on money, and then a variety of civil rights and equity-related inputs, which are very important: non-discrimination, integration, treating special education students equitably. The same with students who speak English as a second language as well. But most of the focus tends to be on we have to add more resources. We absolutely have to be able to do that. But we really like to see Vice President Biden's administration go further. For example, there's a lot of conversation in the country around paying our teachers better. We absolutely support that. But we want to marry increases in federal support to pay our teachers better with reimagining teacher preparation programs. Many of the teacher preparation programs, according to the teachers themselves, simply do not equip them with what they need to be effective in the classroom. There's also the capacity to bring in new providers that frankly tend to have more diverse students in their pipeline so that we can diversify the teaching force. Higher ed is another great space, right? There's a lot of conversation around affordability and free college. Affordability is critical. K-12, right? Tons of conversation about more money in districts, particularly districts serving high poverty students. Absolutely critical. We, of course, believe that student choices, parent choice is a critical part of that because it creates a space for differentiation and innovation. And we also hope on a bipartisan basis, we can get some agreement around some new ideas, a focus on results, bringing innovation into the space, particularly in the aftermath of coronavirus, where it's just exposed these deep inequities that I also believe can hopefully create a space for some new political alliances because rural white communities are being devastated by this. They actually tend to have less access to the just hard wiring, the hard infrastructure with respect to distance learning. And it's also the case, they tend to go to schools as well that are doing very poorly in terms of international benchmarks too. While we have to keep track of the racial differences because that just exacerbates these issues and we have to do that, I think there's an opportunity to also align around class and create a different type of coalition that can hopefully create some real change.
This idea of college and whether or not we should emphasize college is very controversial. How do you look at it in general, and then how do you look at it particularly at a time like this?
Yeah, I think it's critical. I think it's the threshold that we should push all students for, even recognizing that all may not surpass that threshold, so you should have some secondary options available. But I think across the board, the college degree, while there is no 100% guarantee that any particular intervention will lead to a certain result, They're dramatically better. It dramatically increases the probability that a person will be able to live a kind of choice-filled life, and particularly for low-income people and particularly for people of color. But as a sector, we should be focused at the primary goal we ought to have is preparing every student to be able to attend and graduate from college on time so that they can live a choice-filled life.
You're a civil rights attorney.
Mm-hmm.
Can you talk about how you see this as a civil rights issue?
Yeah, it's a huge civil rights issue. We have so many low-income students and students of color simply don't have internet access home. We have some that do, but oftentimes have single parents who may be out of the home at work. So what that looks like in terms of whether those students are learning or not is going to be dramatically different. We have parents who are losing their jobs in the midst of this, right? And so their capacity even to focus on helping their students learn when they're trying to keep the lights on and food on the table is going to be dramatically impacted. Also, we have trauma because people of color are disproportionately losing their lives associated with this virus. I do think many policymakers are aware of this. We're just simply not seeing enough effective action. And I think part of the problem is many just don't know what to do. We have too many districts and even states figuring these things out on their own. And this is frankly something where we really do need a kind of warlike response. There should be coming from, I would argue, the federal government and our states. You know, this is the general playbook that districts need to use to make sure that students learn broadly, and that also that we're addressing the needs of these discrete educational subgroup populations that already face educational deficits and are facing even more now. It's still too much every district for themselves, and that's only going to exacerbate these inequities. Thanks for what you're doing to keep the conversation moving and to get good information out to folks. Appreciate you both.